Alice Brooks, thank you so much for joining me today on Film with Kevin McCarthy. A pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much.
It's an honor because I've talked a lot about you in interviews over the years. I was interviewing Lin-Manuel Miranda for Tick, Tick, Boom. I remember bringing up your incredible cinematography in that film, and obviously the work now you've done with John M. Chu, and we're talking about Wicked and everything that you've worked on together. But it's really an honor to have you here to talk about the work you do, because this show was created really to help people understand the choices that go into the shots that we see in films and the narrative reasons and the discussions that cinematographers have with their filmmakers. And so I start the show off every time because this is like a mock ticket stub.
Amazing for $3.
Yeah, and the date on there is July 3rd, 91, because that's the day that Terminator 2 opened in theaters.
Oh.
And that's the movie that made me fall in love with filmmaking, even at a young age, even if I didn't fully understand it.
How
I was
old were you then?
8.
Amazing.
And so I was going to ask what that movie was for you.
Yeah.
What was the movie that kind of like gave you an understanding of filmmaking?
I remember the very first sort of magical spark, knowing something magical was happening I watched a movie called The Natural with why can't I think of
Robert Redford?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robert Redford is in. Caleb Deschanel shot.
Yeah.
And Glenn Close is in, and Barbara Hershey. And I remember thinking there was something magical happening, and I didn't know what that magic was.
How old were you?
I was 5, I guess. I mean, it came out in '84, but I watched it on a tube TV. We lived in New York City in a 1-bedroom apartment, and my dad loved movies more than anything. So movies were always on, but that's my first memory of watching a movie. And because the space was so small, he figured out ways to allow me to stay up so he could watch movies. And one of them was I had to read the opening credits I had to be able to read the opening credits of a movie in order to watch it. So I learned how to read very early. Wow. And then the second task was I had to learn how to call out the act breaks. So I have to scream out, end of Act 1, end of Act 2 while we were watching a movie. So I understood story structure really early on. But the magic part was really in The Natural. And then the first movie I remember seeing was the re-release. It would have been the re-release of Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
And I was under a chair watching it, or I kept going under the movie seat because I was terrified. But so I think those two movies would probably be my spark movies, my first magic movies.
When did you make the connection, though, that was a spark? So, for example, for me, when I was 8 and I saw T2, I understood that something was happening, but I didn't fully grasp what it meant, right? And so, when I was a kid, I loved magic. So that was this, when I look back on it now as a 41-year-old, I'm like, okay, that's because I loved magic as a kid, and I looked at that movie as a magic trick.
Yeah.
And the filmmaker being a magician and immersing us in their trick in a way. And so, but I didn't realize that until later, that I was like, oh, sound design, filmmaking, cinematography, special effects. So when did that all click for you?
So around the same time as seeing those movies, I was also a child actor. That's right. So my parents...
Commercials.
I did commercials, and I was on Late Night with David Letterman once a week, and I did a little bit of stage work too. But I think I started to put the pieces together, there was actually a commercial I did for Prodigy, which was the first internet, when I was 9. And they sat us in front of just a computer, a PC, and had us play video games. And then they sent us home. I was like, oh, we actually didn't get the job. And then I saw the cut of the commercial, and they had been shooting us the whole time.
Oh, wow.
And so I think I was just starting to piece together, I have a 10-year-old, so I watch her start to piece life together. And so I think all of that was happening simultaneously, where I fell in love with light very early on. When I'd be on these commercials, all I would do would be watching the lighting guys light. So I don't know if there's a moment where I realized oh, this is movie magic. I just think it was sort of puzzle pieces.
Was there ever a shot, besides the one you were mentioning just now where they were filming you, was there ever a shot that you were a part of that you ended up seeing going, oh, that is a really cool shot that I'm in this commercial or in this moment? Like, do you remember one that kind of stuck with you?
I was in a Mousetrap commercial. Do you remember Mousetrap? And it was the day the Challenger blew up. I remember that very clearly. And we were running around on a blue screen stage on jumping on boxes and things. And then when I saw the commercial cut together, we were the mouse pieces running around on the board.
Was it like forced perspective, like how, like to make you look smaller? Like it was. Is that?
I have no clue how they did it. I just remember we were on a blue screen and we were jumping and they had blue ladders and then I saw the commercial. I was like, oh my goodness, we are the board. We're the game pieces.
That's so cool. I mean, honestly, that's the beauty of like falling in love with movies and filmmaking. But obviously, you have that acting background.
Yeah.
I was going to get to the David Letterman thing later in the interview, but you mentioned it. That's a really amazing thing. Obviously, at that point, can you speak about how that came about? So you talked about being a child actor, obviously, before you got into cinematography.
Yeah.
That spark happening, but being on Letterman once a week, like with live audience, I'm assuming. So like how. Yeah. Well, how did that come about? What was the idea?
He would have, I think there were 3 or 4 of us on David Letterman once a week. It was Tuesdays. I didn't have to go to school all day. I think we filmed at like 3 p.m. for that night with a live studio audience. And we would go sit on his desk, and it was called Dave's Story Time, and he'd tell us inappropriate things to tell children. And then, or bring Paul Schaefer and lemonade and interact with him. So it was, I think I loved, there are a couple of reasons. I loved it because I didn't have to go to school, and there was no child labor laws at the time in terms of schooling, so it meant I just didn't go to school on Tuesdays. And I also just knew there was something really cool and special about being part of like this TV show that all my parents and all their friends were always watching late at night.
Yeah. I'm assuming you'd be in bed and sleeping by the time that show aired.
Yes.
Did you ever stay up and watch yourself?
No, my parents, VHS, they would record. So we had VCRs.
So prior to all this, and obviously we're going to dive into your incredible cinematography journey and everything, but I also just, the child acting part of it, how did that begin? Was that something that you wanted to do? Did your parents offer? Like, how did that work?
It really was a way that my parents didn't have any money, and it was at a time where kids could help support the family. And so a friend of my mom said, oh, just call this agent and put them into child acting. And so we went and met with this management company, and I was super shy, like painfully shy. And I sat there and I didn't speak to the manager. And then he kept noticing that I was looking over his shoulder. And then he realized I could read. And he's like, Alice, can you read what's on the wall behind my desk? And I could, because of my dad, I could read everything. And so he knew I could learn lines and read sides. And so that's how it started.
And then, so obviously from acting to cinematography, like what's the first time you pick up a camera to film something?
These are the best questions. These are things like no one has ever asked me before. What's the first time I picked up a camera? I'm going to go. I went to high school just down the street in at Campbell Hall, and tomorrow I'm doing an event for the students where they can ask me questions. And I haven't been back since I graduated, so in 1997. So,
wow,
but they asked me to come in, and I think this whole experience with Wicked has really woken me up to the magic I've created with, we've all created on Wicked for all these young people. And so I'm really excited about that tomorrow. But I got a Facebook message from a classmate who I went to high school with, and he said to me, I didn't realize you had shot Wicked until I saw the advertisement for this thing in the alumni magazine newsletter. And he said, it's amazing because you always had a camera when we were in high school. He's like, you never didn't have a camera. And he's like, that's the thing I remember about you. This is someone I haven't seen since I was 18. And so when I decided not to be an actress, I was 15, and my mom was like, okay, let's figure out what we can do to get you into film school. And I had already sort of gravitated toward this one photography one art teacher at my school, and there was a dark room. And I had a really hard time fitting in high school.
Same.
And so I ended up living in the darkroom I had transferred to this high school when I was in 10th grade. So I didn't even start as a freshman. And this was all at the exact same time. And so I started doing still photography, and I would lock myself in the darkroom during lunch because I just knew I didn't fit in. I was going to a private school and my family had no money. I was on a full scholarship. And I understood my mom wanted me there because she always cared about education, but it was socially it was very hard, and the darkroom saved me.
And in that dark room, you're dealing with the photochemical process, which is a beautiful thing. And obviously, we live in a world now where filmmaking is done digitally, but also on film as well. What was your relationship with that film process at that time, and like shooting an image, waiting for it, putting it in the bath, waiting for it to process? Like what was that? What were those moments like for you?
I mean,
it's exciting, right?
It's true magic. That is the ultimate magic trick. How do you take a camera with some film loaded into it, put it in some chemicals, develop the film, and then print it on a piece of paper, and then suddenly you put it in each bath, and then your image is there, and it magically starts to appear, and you're standing in a red light. I mean, nothing's better than the smell of the chemicals. It's the best. Did you do still photography?
No, it's so funny. I walked in those rooms and watched people do it, but I never did it myself. But I've always been obsessed with how Polaroids work, and just anything that like watching the image come to be after taking it, and that's I think there's a world for both digital and film, and obviously there's a preciousness to each one. But from that point, you end up you meet John in college, right? John M. Chu in college.
I meet John in college. So I'm doing all these still photographs, and doing like now I'm not auditioning, so I'm doing really well in high school, and I end up at USC, also on a scholarship, and and I meet John there, and he's one semester behind me, and he had an interesting way of how he started to like find the group of people he wanted to work with, and then he was making a musical called When the Kids Are Away, and he called me up and he said, "Do you want to meet at Starbucks? I've got this, I got this grant to make this musical short, and would you like to do it with me?" And so we sat in Starbucks, and he brought out this massive binder that I still have and gave it to me, and he had hand drawn every single frame for storyboards. He had all this artwork of what he wanted it to look like. I had never seen a student do so much homework at all, and what he didn't know about me was that I grew up watching musicals. I love musicals. I think it's it's the best genre ever. And even though we didn't have any money growing up, my parents always figured out how to get us into live theater. I actually just got an email from my dad's friend. There's an article in the LA Times, and my dad's friend, he's almost 90. He emails me. He's like, "This brought back memories of your parents leaving you when you were a week old with me so they could go see Evita on Broadway." and so it's like music and musicals were always in our house. My father passed away in my 20s, but I have his book, the MGM Musical coffee table book, and I brought it with me to London when we made Wicked, and so John wanting to do a musical when the Hollywood musical was dead. No one was making them. This was pre-Chicago, pre-Moulin Rouge. It was, but we were just like these two kids who were like, okay, let's go figure out how to make musicals.
And prior to that meeting in Starbucks, so just to rewind just for 2 seconds, going from high school to college, what have you shot at this point by the time you've met John? Like have you shot, I'm assuming you've shot short films, any features by this point? I'm just curious where you were at in your shooting process.
So I'm still at you. So actually, I'm still at USC.
Yeah.
There's this one, and I'm not 100% sure of the timeline. It either happened. So there's one, after I got out of USC, I decided I wanted to go to grad school, but I couldn't afford to go to grad school, and I didn't want any debt. And so I spent the following year out of USC hanging out there and offering every graduate student to shoot their thesis film. During that year, I shot 30 thesis films.
Whoa.
And it was incredible. and so I think it was during that year that John asked me to shoot When the Kids
So
Are
you'd
Away.
already shot
I'd shot a ton of things, and it's interesting because every single movie I had done was on film, but John, it was right when Star Wars' collaboration with Panavision to do the Panavision F900 was about to come out, and we ended up shooting with the beta version of that camera on that movie. John wrote a letter to Panavision, and they let us have the camera for 2 weeks or something.
Really?
Yeah.
And there's a video you posted on your Instagram recently where it's like a video of John recording you, asking you about what you would say to your future self.
Yeah.
That's the film that you were
where
working
we are.
on.
Yeah.
And for people, I hope maybe I can put this video into this conversation.
I can give it that too.
It's such a fascinating video because John's behind the camera interviewing you about your future self, and this is like almost 23 years ago. I think 2000.
It would have been 2022, I guess. Yeah.
2002.
Sorry,
Right,
2002. Yeah.
Which is incredible.
What do you have to say to your future self?
My future self.
After production's done, like what do you want to remind yourself?
How this feeling feels right before production when you're not sure of everything and there's just that little excitement and you're not tired and you haven't shot 12-hour days with 8 kids and 30 dancers.
Oh yeah.
and you just remember that how excited and how the moment feels right before you start to shoot, and then how the moment feels when you are shooting.
That question that he asks you, what would you say to your future self? I guess now I want to reverse that, and then what would you tell her now about where you are?
I mean, every moment I pinch myself now. By 7:30 this morning, I had been texting with so many of my hero cinematographers, and they're now my friends and colleagues. And at 7:30, I took a screen grab of my phone because I was like, even 5 years ago, I would have been like, oh, these are your ASC colleagues. I've been in ASC now almost 4 years, and so I think to my younger self, I wish I could just like pick her up and tell her it's going to be okay, that don't worry about it. It is a very long journey. And even now I understand, like I'm in the middle of a journey. I have no clue what's about to happen, but now I have perspective on that. And so, because when you get out of film school, I mentor this other woman who's recently out of film school. And when you get out, like, I think that is the highest high I've ever been on in my life.
Really?
You are at the top of the world. You think you are completely invincible. And school was just this magic place for me where I finally met people who were like me, who wanted to just create. And it was the first time I felt like I fit in. And so I would just wish I could just like hug my 22-year-old self and say it's all going to be okay, because it has been a long journey and really hard, and it's still really hard. And the journey just never ends. And so just learning to enjoy the journey, I think, is the key. Sometimes I can do that, sometimes I can't.
Hey, honestly, I think we all struggle with being present and kind of appreciating where we are, because we all want to, what's the next thing we're going to do?
Yeah.
So just to give my audience some perspective, so you graduate school, obviously you and John already have a relationship professionally with like the working together, making the film. Then how does that relationship continue on forward? Obviously, we get to Wicked. I know Tick, Tick, Boom happened as well with Lin-Manuel Miranda, but obviously John was involved in that connection as well. But talk about how you stayed in touch with John and kind of how it got to the point where you were shooting these Wicked films with him.
So for a period of time, from this short film, John ended up on the cover of The Hollywood Reporter, and he had a deal to do Bye Bye Birdie for Sony, maybe, and then or Columbia, and then he sat in like 5 years of like limbo with that movie. And then I went off and I started shooting independent movies and doing commercials, music videos, and just shooting as much as I could. And then, but our paths definitely diverged for quite some time. And then in 2008, so 6 years later, 2009, I was at Obama's inauguration, and we had seen each other mostly socially at this point, but we hadn't worked together, and he was on a definitely a different level. I think you can escalate as a director very quickly, and as a cinematographer, it definitely is a different speed. And he called me while I was at the inauguration. He's like, I've got this idea for the superhero web series, and Hulu is doing it, and Hulu's this new website, and they're going to produce content, and we basically can do anything we want. And they've given us money to make 5 episodes, but can you be here in LA tomorrow? So I leave Washington, D.C., I jump on a plane, I go to LA, and I'm living in Maine at the time. And so I find some couches to sleep on for 6 weeks, and we make the first 5 episodes of what will end up being 31 episodes of this web series. And the first 5, we had no money to make it. And then slowly we got a little bit more money, never a lot of money to make them, but it became this playground over that 3 years for us to, we could make all the mistakes we wanted. We just like kept trying different things, learning how to tell a story through dance and through music. Christopher Scott became our choreographer at that point. John had done Step Up 2 at this point, and so and during that, and he brought in other guest directors because he would go off during those 3 years. I think he made 2 movies, Step Up 3D, and I guess
was it
G.I.
G.I. Joe?
I think so.
Yeah.
So we did that, and I think that started to seal this bond with us for sure. In terms of, after that, he started always bringing me in to meet on movies, even though I wasn't going to get hired on them. And then we did a Blumhouse movie called Gem and the Holograms, and had the greatest time making that movie. And then what happened after that? Oh, we were supposed to do a pilot for an ABC pilot, and that got pulled out from under us at the last minute. And then about 6 months later, we did a TV series called Home Before Dark for Apple, which was one of their first in the lineup. And while we were in prep on that, Crazy Rich Asians came out. And when Crazy Rich Asians came out, he sort of could tell everyone what he wanted.
Yeah.
And he was about to do In the Heights. And so that's the first movie I didn't interview on. I just had that job.
Wow. I remember Anthony Ramos telling an amazing story about that beginning sequence, that shot, just like the whole beginning.
Yeah.
What a remarkable, that entire film is shot so well. And obviously that's kind of, I think that was the first time in my mind I understood your incredible cinematography, and I went back and looked at it and watched your earlier work as well. But that was the first time I really noticed you. And I was like, that is incredible. And then obviously the work that you've done now with John going forward has been remarkable as well. And I want everybody listening to go back and watch all of Alice's earlier work. You can see the journey that you've been on. And I remember seeing In the Heights going, oh my gosh, that is remarkable work.
And the thing about In the Heights that I loved is like it took me back to where I came from.
Yeah.
And being able to make a movie in New York City in a community that wasn't unlike the community I lived in, I grew up in New York, and being able to see that through the film, that sort of through that perspective and those eyes also was wonderful.
Yeah, the opening scene of that film, everything's amazing. Obviously, I want to dive into now. We're obviously talking post the release of Wicked Part 2. So anybody listening, if you haven't seen Wicked, tune out for now or come back. I'm assuming everybody's seen it if you're listening to this episode. But we're going to dive into some spoilers, just particularly about certain shots that I want to talk about. But I know this has been a big question that has been asked a lot about the idea of shooting both films at the same time. But what's interesting about that is the tonal difference between the two. Of course, there's a darker element to the second part, but they're both have dark and light in terms of storytelling and thematics. But you'd be shooting both parts in the same day at certain times. And I was just curious how you kept track of where you were. And I'm assuming lens choices and everything were switching up between part 1 and part 2 to give them different looks, different sets, different lights. I'm just curious if you could speak about those aspects of between the two different parts of the film.
So actually, the one thing that we didn't switch was the lenses.
Really?
So that was the one consistent. So I wanted there to be a visual, like a visual arc between that was a continuum from movie 1 into movie 2, but that each movie would have its own distinct visual style. So,
But same lenses.
but we used the same lenses. So
interesting.
We, except for one, and actually this was a debate all through prep. Like I was testing 2 different sets of lenses. I was like, oh, maybe we use one for one and one for the other. But then I realized that was going to be the thing that would remain the same, and that the tonal shift would happen with lighting. And so,
which goes back to your beginning
Yeah.
about being interested in lighting. That's cool. That's cool.
the only lens, our Glinda and Elphaba each have their own sort of hero lens that is their hero close-up lens. And for Elphaba, it's the 65 millimeter, and it was a close focus lens that's 10 inches, so that we could get really, really close to her. Cool. And Glinda, we used a 75 millimeter lens, and I think that had like a 2-foot close focus. So we were using different lenses for each character, but we'd match the sizes if we wanted them to have the same image size, especially in the first movie when they're in scene so much together. But then at the very end of the second movie, when the Grimmery opens for Glinda, I use Elphaba's Hero 65 millimeter lens.
Oh, wow.
As just a way to each lens had its own unique characteristics, but as a way for Elphaba to always live on in Glinda.
See that right there is the genius of what you do. Like that is the coolest thing, because that's something we feel subconsciously.
Yeah.
And I remember, have you ever read Sidney Lumet's Making Movies book?
I think in college, not in a really long time.
But he has like this story in the book where he's talking about 12 Angry Men, and at the beginning of the film, the camera is above eye level, then it goes to mid eye level, and then below eye level, and the lenses change throughout because you start to feel subconsciously claustrophobic in the room with the jurors. And I'm like, that is like, who thinks of that stuff? And like that, like to me, to the point you're making. So back to the hero lenses that you chose for Elphaba and Glinda, how did you decide those? Were they tests on Cynthia and Ariana to see which one? And why do you feel that lens works better for Elphaba versus this lens working for Glinda?
So during our makeup test, Cynthia was only in green makeup with some freckles on her face. She didn't have her wig on, so she was bald and didn't have her. I think maybe she was just wearing a black sweater or something. And we did this push-in, and John really wanted to see how soon the makeup would break. And so we put the 65 millimeter on because it had our closest focus.
You mean break as in like
okay, can we like at some point does it feel like makeup? During our makeup test, it was constantly about we wanted her skin to shine through. We wanted it to feel like skin, not like makeup.
Yeah.
And so we pushed in. And so I put the 65 millimeter on because I knew we could get super close to her. And so we pushed into like this super tight close up, and I don't even think she had the green contacts in at this point even. Oh no, she did. And we pushed in, and there was just this sparkle in her eyes. And when we projected it at Company 3, John's like, because I was still debating which set of lenses I was even using, and he's like, I love this lens. And that's how we chose Cynthia's lens. And then for Ariana, I put it on her, but it just didn't, there's something, I don't know, there's just different recipes make different people look different, and it wasn't the same thing. And so I tried the 85 next, and we ended up never using the 85. We didn't use that lens, but then we ended up the 75 just became her hero lens.
So and when you say hero lens, because I want to make sure the audience understands that that's the lens you're using on the character anytime you're in a close up.
Anytime we're in a close up.
Okay, and so like essentially, if you're on a day shooting and we have a Glinda close up, you call for that lens. Yes. And then so when you're in shots that are far out or a 2-shot.
Right.
do you have consistent lenses for all of those, or do they shift?
No, those shifted per scene. The 40 millimeter was a big lens that we used often when we were splitting the frame pretty evenly, but we used every lens we had.
And I think the reason why I created this show is to understand these conversations that you have with your director.
Yeah.
And I think what I want to point out to people is these aren't shots to look cool. They're narratively driven, so you feel a certain way. Yeah. They can look cool. Like, for example, when they're spinning around in Wonderful holding on to Karsten's arm. Like, that's a really cool moment. But I want to talk about like narrative decisions you have with John about the lens choices and the filmmaking, because you're shooting the Alexa 65. Yep. You're in anamorphic. Is it 235?
It's 239.
239.
And they're 1 point. So anamorphic comes in two different squeezes, 1.3 or 2 times squeezed, and they're 1.3 times anamorphic.
Wow.
And they're lenses I developed with Dan Suzuki at Panavision over the course of 2 years leading up to making Wicked.
For the film. Talk about the process of developing a lens. Like what do you say to Panavision? Here's what I need.
So I don't even think I could mention what film I was doing when I first started, but I called Dan Suzuki, and I actually just was over at Panavision last week.
Why didn't you invite me? I want to go to Panavision. Gosh, Alice, come on.
Next time.
All right, text me next time. All right.
We're already talking about what we're going to do for our next set of lenses. So we're there, and I'm not even there. I'm just emailing him. It's during COVID.
Yeah.
We're having these conversations. He actually pulled out all the emails last week to go through, because he's trying to piece back how we created these lenses together that they now are, producing on a bigger scale. So they're called now the Ultra Panatar 2s. At the time, there wasn't even a name for them. So
they were invented for Wicked.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we just would go back and forth, and I'd send him references, and then and I'd been shooting In the Heights and Tick Tick Boom were both shot on 2 times anamorphic, and they have a much more anamorphic feel. And when we first got the first, I'd only get one lens at a time to test because he was literally making them as we were discussing. And so the first one I think was the 35, but it just didn't have enough anamorphic feel to it. And I didn't want it to feel like a 2 times squeeze, but I just needed more anamorphic properties on the edges. And so
you would like when it's blown out a little bit,
vignetted, and when there's warpiness on the side, and there's texture, and there's imperfections. Like, the more imperfect a lens you can get me, the better.
And that's beautiful to me. I remember seeing the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford and Robert Roger Deakins, but he had these Deaconizers lenses, and it was gorgeous because it would like blur out the edges, and it made it such a more immersive feeling as an audience member. Like, those warped aspects are interesting narrative choices as well. They fit into the world.
Well, and I think every single choice that I make is rooted in these emotional intentions that John and I discuss. Like, I'm not just going, okay, we're going to shoot on a 75-foot techno crane because I want this really fast shot because it's going to be cool. Or it all comes from just trying to dissect John Chu's brain and go, okay, how do I make his vision come to life? Right? It all starts with him. He's our leader. It ultimately is his movie, and we're there to support that vision and that storytelling. And so early on, all we talk about is emotional intentions and images that are percolating, and some of those images then became reality, like hands. Hands were one of the very first ideas of images that were percolating, and we just would keep this long running list of different ideas of what images could potentially be, and then eventually you start dreaming long enough that they become reality.
Yeah, and it's interesting how hands or shoes or something can tell you who a character is. Like, it's like Strangers on a Train, for example. When you watch the opening of that film, you learn who the characters are by their feet. Like, you literally meet the characters as they're walking on a train, and you go, okay, I understand. I know who those guys are already before I even see them based on their shoes.
Go watch In the Heights and tell me how many feet shots we have at some point. And because
they're character driven.
The way you move your feet, the way you walk, the stance you take, it is all the character you create. Yeah.
It's so fascinating. Shadows and reflections are a big part of the storytelling in this film, and I've seen the movies multiple times. I'm obsessed with a lot of the way shadows are used in the film. Obviously, I want to get to specific scenes in Wicked for Good, but as a cinematographer, the power of reflection, the power of, and again, I keep bringing up other films, but you've seen the movie Contact, right?
Yes, I mean,
you know what shot I'm referring to.
Yes, because that was our biggest reference for Girl in the Bubble.
I've seen Zemeckis explain. So
Yeah.
for people who don't know, in Contact, Jenna Malone's character runs up the stairs towards the mirror, and it's one of the coolest shots I'd ever seen in my life. I've seen Zemeckis explain it. I've seen it broken down. I still don't understand how it was done. Like, I really don't. And so that's kind of, I'm glad you brought up the Girl in the Bubble, because that is what that reminded me of. And I was curious, what was your reaction when you saw that Contact shot for the first time? Were you like blown away by it?
First, I loved that novel, and so I was so excited when it came out. And this would have been, I think,
97 or something?
Okay, so I would have just been out of high school.
Yeah.
Or I think it came out that summer. So it was, so I'm really interested in filmmaking at this point. And when I saw that shot, I kept going to the movie theater all summer
Just to watch it
over and over again.
Yeah.
It was mind blowing to me.
It's still one of the best shots I've ever seen. Like
100%.
Do you fully grasp? You know how it's done, right? Like, can you explain
but I've watched it so many. No, I can't explain.
I don't
it.
understand.
I've watched his videos so many times.
Same.
And then we've talked about Girl in the Bubble and how we've done it, and people are like, "What?"
Yeah.
But it makes complete sense how we did Girl. Like I understand. Well, we did it. So I know.
Let's talk about the shot you did, because talk about that's a Contact homage or reference from something you saw when you were growing up. So how did you achieve your Girl in the Bubble reflection shot?
So John first he knew he wanted the song to Ari to sing, or Glenda to sing. I always call her Ari.
It's okay.
Okay, Glenda to sing "Looking in the Mirror," and but he said we can't sustain 3.5 minutes of a song where she just stands there and looks in the mirror. And then we just started talking about the idea of what are the stories you tell yourself that turns you into the person you've become, and when you look at yourself, is that the person you want to be any longer? And he's like, let's just start watching these mirror shots. So we YouTubed greatest movie mirror shots of all time. Everything from Peggy Sue Got Married, which also has a great one, and most of them use doubles to make it work, and we didn't, but and then we'd look at YouTubers who had created wonderful mirror shots, and we started to think about, okay, could we possibly sustain this as a oneer? And we've always wanted to do a oneer, but again,
John loves a good oneer. He does love a good
oneer. But we don't do it, we haven't actually done it as a musical number. And so there have been times where we wanted to, in the Heights, we do a dance on the side of the building. And we wanted to do that for 12 years. And then John goes, I've got the number. When he got in the Heights, he's like, I know the number we're going to do this for. And so we always have in the back of our head, things that would be interesting. So when we decided to do this as a oneer, it was like, okay, how do we move in and out of mirrors? And so that you never know if you're inside the mirror or you're outside the mirror. But by the end, we knew we had to come out of a mirror. And originally, the set only had 3 mirrors, and we needed to build in a 4th so that we could get out of the mirror in the end.
Wow.
So what we did, so it ended up being it's several shots stitched together.
Like 4 shots or something, or
a little bit more than that.
Okay.
So it is. The first shot is a steady cam shot of her outside of the mirror, and then we start to turn and we look at the mirror and we push into the mirror. So the second shot is the shot inside the mirror.
It's like an invisible stitch.
So it's an invisible stitch.
Wow.
So all happen except for one stitch happen inside the mirror. So then the second shot, because mirrors are math, you need to be a certain distance. You basically need to double your distance so the reflection looks like a reflection. So we're on a set that's built up 12 feet high, so we can get low angles looking up at the balcony from below Emerald City, Bach looking up at Glinda. And so, but we needed this wall that's goes all the way up to the rafters to move out of the way so that we could get, from the mirror's perspective, we can get far and double our distance back.
Wow.
So they had to build a platform that direction so that so the second shot starts far and it pushes into Glinda. And so now this is our mirror, our second shot, which is our mirror. But then as we come around, that wall needs to hinge back into place so that it's back, so that you don't see that it was ever missing. So special effects built it so that it would hinge back. And then we come around. So this is still our second Steadicam shot. And then as we look up at the mirror, once we're completely flat plane, that becomes our second shot. So now we're on the ceiling mirror. And that is now a crane. So again, we have to double our distance. So the set of the height of the ceiling was based off of that. So and this is a crane so we're on a 45-foot techno crane now. Wow. And so now we're pushing into Glinda and it looks like we're going into the mirror, but now we're actually out of the mirror. So now we're not flipped. And so now, and then it takes us all the way up the staircase. So that's why we needed to be on a crane. So we go up the staircase, and then this is the only place where we stitch it together that isn't in a mirror, because we have to come off the crane to be on Steadicam.
So what do you use to switch it?
So
like a table or something? Like,
no, we don't. It's just on her back, and Pablo Hellman, our VFX supervisor, is like, it would be better if you just like do a fully wipe on her back, and we're like, well, then it doesn't feel like magic, and so we
kind of like what Hitchcock did on Rope. Remember Rope?
Yeah.
Because he only had like 11-minute magazines, and he would go behind Jimmy Stewart's back, and they would cut. And you had no idea. And it was like 1940 something. It was like
it's
crazy.
amazing.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And so then we go into the closet. We call it the Hall of Memories, and we pass through the mirror this time, and then she comes into and when we pull back far enough, where suddenly she comes into profile, looking at herself, and she turns away from herself, and so that is that's our fourth shot, and now we're back on the crane because we have to come back down the stairs, and then we end in the beautiful that shot where we see her and she sits down on the stairs. It's one of my favorite shots, and then we see we don't see the mirror. Then we pull out of the mirror. So now we're back into the Steadicam shot as we pull out of the mirror, and we're out of the mirror. So that's the fifth shot, which is a Steadicam shot, and then the other shots are reflection plates. So we got the little girl reflection in the bubble. And
so from the crane to off the crane, what was your stitch? It was behind her back.
It was just but we don't. Visual effects completely helped us. It's a morph, but we shot it in a way. We had her start in the exact same position. Poor Ariana. Her start in the exact same position, so that, and we because we didn't use any motion control or anything. So our Steadicam operator Karsten is remarkable and just like so solid, everything so precise, and we layered it to make sure she was in the exact same position and she crosses.
And everything you just described is emotionally driven, which I think is so cool, because like the technical part of it, I'm blown away by because it all seems so seamless in the film. I had no idea that you were dealing with all that like contact style. That's so cool.
And we shot it in 2 days.
Unbelievable. And she's singing live.
And she's singing live.
What the hell?
And and also because we are looking 360 degrees, we're doing all these live lighting cues like a live show. And we do that actually throughout the whole movie. But even as the light, and again, it's all emotionally driven, and it's live so that we can feel what she's doing and react off of her performance rather than just go bake in, okay, we're going to, as she steps forward here, we're going to shift the light. So the gaffer and the dimmer board operator are always standing right next to me, and we're able to, I can just say, okay, dim up or down, or at some point we had enough of a rhythm. This was only the second full musical number we shot for both movies. Again, we're shooting simultaneously.
Was Popular first?
Popular was first. Then we shot some of all the dorm room stuff of What Is This Feeling? And then we shot the forest part of I'm Not That Girl. But some of the forest part, we shot. Some of that's real forest and some of that is built forest. So we had shot some of that. But in its entirety, we had shot Popular, and then our second full number was Girl in the Bubble.
As these shots are being broken up, Ariana's is in the movie. It's a continuous song.
Yeah.
How does she know where to pick up, like in terms of like the same tone she was already in prior to that next line she's about to deliver with music? How do you even like stay consistent?
I have no clue how she did it.
Like, you know what I mean?
No, I mean it's
Like,
it's,
what the
it
hell?
is a remarkable over 2 days too, right? Like, so I can't remember. I think we got through like the first 4 shots on the first day, and then she has to go the next day. And not only that, her skirt is 5 feet in diameter.
Oh wow.
And so sometimes for us to be able to get close enough, we have people pulling her skirt back while she's acting so that the camera can be as close as it needs to be. Like, especially when we pull back from when we go back after the Hall of Memories, when she turns into that profile, they had to push her skirt forward so that we could get. And so she's got people on the ground underneath. I mean, it's pretty nuts.
It kind of reminds me of like shots where people have to remove track and build
yeah.
it on. Like I've seen like I think Gus Van Sant did one in one of his movies where they were building the track as the camera was moving.
Really?
Because it was such a long shot. I think it was the one about Kurt Cobain, the Kurt Cobain film with Michael Pitt.
I'm doing the third Spider-Verse movie right now, which is an animated movie, and so we don't have right. Like we're all in the Unreal Engine. It's all virtual, and
But
so
you can choose lenses and lighting. It's so cool.
But and even when you were talking about Sidney Lumet and the like just being able to in real time be able to feel because they're cutting it so next door, and so being able to see the lens selection actually makes a massive and so I have our lens information written on the side or output on the side, so that when I'm watching the cut, if there's something that I'm not affected by, then I go back and reshoot it on a different lens.
Wow. So from reflections to shadows, obviously shadows play a major part, particularly, and again, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, but when Elphaba's death is fake, is the fake death sequence. But the way that is shot, I know that Cynthia is actually performing that moment.
Yeah.
We're just seeing the shadow. I want to see the BTS of her doing it, because I imagine it must have been incredible to see that. Talk about lighting that, getting that shadow, because the shadow has to tell us everything that's happening in that moment. And it has to be like incredibly well done, which it is. And I'm just curious if you can speak on how you set that up, how you blocked it so that her shadow did hit the wall in a way that we could all understand.
So we call that the melting of the Wicked Witch scene, and it's all from Ariana's perspective. From inside the door. And if we are outside the door, then things are warped. We use something called a Petzval lens for like the close-up on the bucket and on Dorothy's shoe, so that's really very warped. But the shadow play was every weekend I would go in and pre-light the set beforehand, and I'd send John stills over the weekend. Like while I'm on the stage, I would send him stills, and as I was playing with stuff. So
like a stand-in would stand in and do the shadow?
Well, my 10-year-old daughter would do the shadow.
You're joking?
No, I'm not.
So there's footage of your 10-year-old daughter doing the Cynthia's shadow.
I didn't know exactly what she was going to be doing. I've got a picture of her with her as the Dorothy shadow with the bucket, and the broom and stuff.
Yeah.
But we were figuring out how the shadow play would play, what part of the wall it would work best on, because there is stone wall and then there's also a tapestry. So where the shadow played the best and what angles looked the most interesting for the shadow play to happen. We also, for the sliver of the door, we built something wider to shoot. So we had the wood pieces that we could adjust the width.
Cool.
So yeah, but yes, there's pictures of my daughter standing in on a Sunday afternoon as with the shadow play on the wall.
But talk about the specific moment shooting Cynthia in that sequence, and kind of like how that was set up exactly, like where she is, where the lighting is, where the camera is, like how is that shadow? I mean, I feel like maybe it's a little more obvious than I'm asking, but I'm just curious how that looked.
So we have this huge window, the huge round window that you eventually see I guess you haven't actually seen this window yet in the movie, but eventually Glenda goes and picks up the hat and sees Chistry. So the shadow play comes all from that direction, and the camera is in the perspective of where the closet door is for when we did it. And I mean, so that you have it's just one huge source that is that's hitting it, and it also needed to be the warm color of the firelight. So I used different colors of the rainbow throughout the movie to light different scenes, and each color means something. And so orange is the color of Elphaba's transformation. And so you see it in No Good Deed when she lights the fire, and we used real flame there or everywhere in Kiyomako we used real flame. And so that orange flame is the color of her transformation. And so you see it when she turns into the Wicked Witch of the West, what everyone wants her to be during No Good Deed. And then you see it again when at Kiyomako as she gives Glinda the Grimoire and says, it's your turn now, and she's stepping back. And so then you see it in the melting. So the color is that orange on the walls of Kiyomako.
So every lighting choice is based on the rainbow?
Every lighting choice is based on the rainbow. So blue's the color of Elphaba and Glinda's love, and you see it in the Ozdas ballroom, and then you see it in the moonlight at Kiyomako during For Good. So there's color choices throughout.
Can I ask the other color choices
Sure.
too?
So purple is the color of destruction, and it is you see it in the tornado, and that color, that was interesting because as I was looking for tornado references, they're all green. And I'm like, well, we can't have a green tornado in Wicked. and then I remember this story my dad told me about my mom and my dad when my mom was pregnant with me, were in Texas. My dad directed dinner theater, and they were in Texas doing a show, and they were watching a movie in a movie theater, and there was a tornado that came, and it was the last reel of the movie playing, and they evacuated the movie theater. My dad said, no, we're going to just sit here and watch the rest of the movie. And they came out, and all the cars were flipped in the parking lot, and my dad described the color of the light as this violet color, as this purple. And so I decided that our twister could be purple. And so I pitched the idea to John, and he loved it. And then I could never find any purple tornado, but I found a purple storm image, and that became, and then and all of this, purple can be many shades of purple. So then we go and test and figure out during our camera prep what color purple is. Red is the color of regret, and you see it in the lover scene in between the mom and the wizard, and then you see it again when the shoes glow red for Nessa as when she's floating on air. Her desire to be back, in the days of Shiz. When she feels like she's floating on air. What other colors? Yellow is the color of Glinda's intuition, and you see it when she picks the color of the yellow brick road. The yellow, we had the yellow brick road in the first movie changes color, and the yellow glows on her face, and then you see it we push light through the yellow flowers when she's a little girl in her scene, and you see it on the yellow butterflies. So her wedding is a mix of yellow and pink light, and then when the Grimoire opens for her, yellow hits her face.
What's pink?
Pink is popularity.
Yeah. This is truly mind-blowing to me. I hope people appreciate every single detail that goes into this. I mean, that is remarkable. Last night we were speaking, I did a Q&A with John M. Chu and Myron Kirstein and as well as Mark Platt. And we were talking about all the different incredible filmmaking aspects that went into Wicked for Good, but particularly the intimate nature of how For Good is shot. Because you look at Defying Gravity, it's obviously a massive, incredible moment, but also intimate in a way. And I think that's the kind of the story of all the Wicked moments in the film, is they're all intimate yet epic at the same time. But the characters earn this vulnerability, this intimate moment they're going to have with For Good, and the way it's shot is remarkable. And I was wondering if you could just speak to, I know John, obviously, I think it was shot in a couple different ways with cranes and sweeping shots and everything. Talk about the difference between the way you shot it and the different ways you shot it and how you ended up with the more intimate, like the camera circling around. And then even Myron last night talking about when do we go to Ari?
Yeah.
When do we go to Glenda? Or when do we go to Cynthia? And so it's like, when do you choose the shot? And then we hear Ariana sniffling or Glenda sniffling, and it's like, but we're behind her when that happens. So talk about that sequence and kind of how it originated maybe as a bigger, more sweeping musical piece versus what it is now.
What I love about working with John and the long relationship we have with each other is that it can be incredibly uncomfortable because we can be completely honest with each other, and we can also go, okay, this isn't working, so what do we do? And I can say that to him, he can say it to me. So For Good was a cover set somehow. So that means we were outside in Munchkinland shooting the opening number of the first movie, and it was going to rain for the next several days. So, and the only stage that was ready, the only set that was ready, and it wasn't actually completely ready, was the Kiamako parapet set. So John has to go talk to Ariana and Cynthia and go, look, we're going to go shoot For Good tomorrow. It was this big challenge for all of us because now I had pre-lit, but there were elements we didn't have in place, like the torch light. The torches weren't completely set up where I needed them to be on the walls. So we knew we were going to have like a slower start that first morning, and that's to be expected when you have to pivot so drastically. So we went in, and it was great, beautiful. I love everything about the lighting in that scene. It feels like a Renaissance painting to me, and that's what I wanted. And then and so we shoot the dialogue scene, and then the next day we do so it's a Thursday and a Friday, and the next day we're doing, and maybe we started shooting some of the singing, and then the next day we shoot more of the singing, and we end at the end of the number as one would, and we're on a high platform again. All our sets were 12 feet up for some reason. So we're on this platform, and we had our cranes. We had 2 cranes because we were supposed to be in Munchkinland, so we just brought them here. So we had 2 cranes, and we were, and the plan was always to do like this huge, sweeping, grand shot on the end, and we kept shooting it, and even though they're singing their hearts out, like I felt nothing. I'm just standing there. I'm like, why am I feeling nothing? And this is the moment I should be feeling everything. And so John and I talked about it, and we're like, oh, well, they are singing to each other. In the stage, they sing out. And on the stage show, they sing out. But we're in a movie, and they can't sing out. They're talking. It's a dialogue scene, essentially. And so I start to go back to, okay, what are the original intentions? And John had asked me early on what my goal was for the movie, and I said that it would be the greatest love story ever told between these 2 women, these 2 best friends. And then I thought about all those shots that had been percolating in our minds, and we had already done the circle, the 360-degree shot in Defying Gravity, and the Asdas Ballroom. And so that had become a motif for us. And they're singing at the same, right, they're singing together. They're not, it's not one and the other at this point when we do our when we end up doing our 360-degree shot. And so we're like, okay, let's do a 360-degree shot. But the problem is it's 5 p.m. on a Friday. To do a 360-degree shot, they're standing on the edge of this parapet with a 12-foot drop. So I need a platform for Karsten to be able to do a 360-degree shot, to be able to walk around them. And then on top of that, I'm not rigged to light. Doing a 360-degree shot means you'll have camera shadow if you're not changing the light constantly.
And changing it in real time as you're going around, like you were doing with the water with Ariana.
So we all agree that we'll go back, that we can't finish. And so John talks to Ari and Cynthia and says, look, we need to do this. And I don't know how he remembered, but he had done rehearsal with them. And then he came to all of us and he's like, okay, we're going to do it this way. But then I want them to be able to go right into the closet and have their goodbye together. And I don't want to shoot Cynthia's side and then Ariana's side. I want them to have this moment in real time together. And so that I'm like, okay, well, we're going to have to rip the wall out then. And then Nathan's like, well, if you rip the wall out, you can never look that direction again.
Nathan Crawley, by the way, who's incredible.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And John goes, but I want this moment. And so they finish for good. They go, and we set up for the in-camera split screen shot. And you can tell it's not fake because the wall is like, if we had done it in post, the wall would be completely level, square, but it's not. It's broken. It's literally, we ripped the wall away to do this moment between the two of them where the camera doesn't move. After we've come around them, we just sit with them, and it's a very long shot as they say goodbye, as they are through the door, have this moment of sorrow. And anyway, the whole I love. Oh, but then I see a cut of For Good, and the crane shots are in it.
Uh-oh. Oh,
Did Myron tell you
cut
this?
cut it together. Oh, I think he did say this last night. So the original cut of it had the crane shots.
Had the crane shots, and
you were probably like, wait, where's the?
So then and that's also Myron and I have done 5 movies together now at this point. So
I like to see the crane shot version, just out of curiosity.
Just out of curiosity.
Yeah.
So I go to a friends and family screening. I see it. I make a list. I make notes, and I call John and I said, can I talk through my notes with you? And he's like, just send them to me in email format. And so, and the biggest one was, in For Good, why are you using the crane shots? and I don't know if he actually ever read it or not. And I said something to Myron for sure as well. And that's what I love about John too, is like there's no ego, and he loves that Myron and I have a very close collaboration as well. And Myron's watching every single one of our dailies, and every day at Wrap we have a conversation. We started this on In the Heights, and so we're completely in tune with each other. And so I just mentioned it, and some notes he takes, some notes he doesn't. And then I watched the final cut of the movie, and John said, "What do you think?" I'm like, "I love it," and he's like, "You're happy the crane shots are out, aren't you?"
Yeah. See, honestly, because you guys were listening to your film.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, sometimes they forget, like, you got to listen to your movie's speaking to you in that way. You kind of mentioned this interesting thing about, like, not feeling anything when you were using the big shots. And obviously that led to where we are now with the shot we have in the film. And that leads me to an interesting thing about, as a cinematographer, you're behind the camera capturing vulnerability and intimacy in a way that is so universal to audiences. Like when Cynthia, as Elphaba, has that line of like, "Just look at me," not with your eyes, with theirs. There's something about the way that is shot, and then the reaction to Ariana as Glinda.
Yeah.
When you're behind the camera on a moment like that, is there a part of you that almost forgets your as cinematographer, and you get immersed in that moment, like you get lost in it too? Does that happen often on a set?
Yeah, and those are the best moments,
Yeah.
because then, for me, it means my work is invisible, and that's the point, is that it's just supporting the story.
All right, I want to bring up Wonderful, because one of the things that John and I spoke about in the interview was Karsten, your incredible camera operator, and I want to highlight your crew too, because
I love my crew so much on this movie.
Who's your key grip?
Guy Micheletti.
Okay, and then you have Karsten, who's your camera operator.
Guy Micheletti's the key grip. Karsten Jakobsen is A camera. Simon Finney's B camera, and just an amazing eye and storyteller. I love him so much. And then David Smith is our gaffer.
Yeah, and you have it's an incredible team. Yeah. And so you get to a musical number like Wonderful. And again, this goes back to what I was saying about narrative choices. That scene is supposed to, they're mixing up emotions and we're kind of being under the spell of the wizard and kind of the way that's shot. And so we get to a part where we're all spinning around, and it's this incredible sequence where Ariana as Glinda, Cynthia as Elphaba, and Jeff as the wizard are all hanging on what appears to be the camera as they're spinning around in this shot.
Yeah.
Talk about like how that came about, and that's your camera operator holding on to the actors.
Yeah.
How do
going really fast.
How do you keep focus? Like
focus is right there. That we had very tricky focus shots, and Lewis Humes was our focus puller, and he is, I think, third generation focus puller. He doesn't pull off a monitor. He pulls right next to the camera.
Wow.
And he's right that he is he works harder than anyone. I mean, he's incredible. He tells a story through focus. I love him dearly. And then one other crew member I want to mention is Daniel Bocking, who's our dimmer board operator, who spent 2 weeks working out the rainbow of light circling. So every day we would be shooting on a different stage, and at the end of the day, the dance team would be in there dancing, and Daniel would be in there working out the speed and the colors and all of that, because those are all our color selections for all our colors of the rainbow, and the rainbow represents infinite possibilities for Elphaba in this moment. And so, and with Nathan, also Nathan Crowley, our production designer, that the ceiling, when you come into that in from the control room into the throne room, and those sets are connected, so you have this handheld, really fun kid moment of being under the wizard's head going through, and then you tilt up to this beautiful ceiling, and so that ceiling is real, and it goes all the way up to the top. And originally Nathan he built the ceiling, and they're these little scallop ceiling, but they connected, and so there was no room to light. And so I had to work with him to separate them by 10 inches each so that we could do that swirl. One, just light it so you could see it in other scenes, but so that we could do this rainbow swirl of light.
Lighting, and I want to dive a little bit into lighting specifically, because I know you talked about lighting being something that you were early on very interested in. And lighting is such a fascinating thing because of also the way it reflects off of characters, also in their eyes.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering, like, could you just basically break down, when you're setting up a shot, what comes first? The lighting, the camera movement? What is the basic, the constant that happens when you're? I know every set's different. I know every location's different. But is lighting your first thing you think about? How does that? What's your mindset?
So we during prep we've storyboarded. We've done some pre-lighting in the Unreal Engine. And we've gone to dance rehearsal. Karsten has been at dance rehearsal the entire time. So he was with us for 10 weeks of prep. So he was learning the choreography just as the dancers were learning the choreography. And that was something I had to fight for, because usually studios don't want to pay to have a camera operator on that long. So that was one of the things that I really encouraged us doing. And it was essential to our movie. And then lighting. So we're pre-lighting, early pre-lighting before sets are even built in the Unreal Engine, but then we go in and we pre-light a week or 2 weekends before for what the work is coming up. So but I know what the shots are planned, but then they always change, right? You can plan, and then the magic of making movies is you throw away that plan, and the actors are there now. You have a set that's fully dressed for the first time, and this magical fusion happens between all the departments and the actors and the director, and that's when you're actually making the movie at this moment. And so when that fusion happens, things change. So we do pre-light on the weekend, and then we go in and we're shooting in a different way than we had originally planned, and then we have to tweak the lighting. So there's no, it's the chicken and the egg.
Wow, that's incredible. Going back, you mentioned something earlier about having your daughter with you when you were testing out the shadow shots, and I find that interesting to me because you said your daughter's 10.
Yep.
And I don't have kids, but I have to imagine that when you have kids, that it affects the artist you are, the way you emote to material, the way you are connected to material. When you look at yourself as a cinematographer prior to having a child and then now having a 10-year-old, do you see a distinct difference in the artist you are because you became a mom?
I think the stories that I have gravitated to since becoming a mom almost all have the same theme, and it is about people who feel powerless, and they only find their power when they realize it's been inside them the whole time. And it's the theme of In the Heights, it's the theme of Tick, Tick, Boom, and it's the theme of Wicked. And that is the story I want to tell. I think being a child in this world with the internet and Instagram and Twitter or X or what, I think I think it's getting more and more complicated. And so whatever can instill in young people that they are powerful inside themselves, is the story I want to tell.
And then with a film like this and having it out in the world, does your daughter ask you questions about, Mom, how'd you shoot that? How'd you shoot this? Like, is she interested at all? And are you noticing a little bit of yourself in her and that interest of like lighting and cinematography?
Yeah, she got her school photo back, and just her elementary school photo back, and she came to me. She's like, "Mom, I love it, except I think they colored it a little too warm." and she gravitates toward costume design,
Yeah.
so she's sewing Barbie clothes and things. But half her life has been Wicked. She was 5 when Mark Platt offered me the movie.
Wow.
And so she doesn't remember anything before Wicked. And she was with me every school holiday. My family moved to London. My dog, my huge 80-pound golden retriever, my husband, my daughter, and we all picked up and moved our lives to London for the movie for 14 months. And so there's no, to her, there's no real difference between Wicked and life.
You mentioned costume design. Paul Tazewell, obviously, like incredible, won the Oscar
Yeah.
for the first Wicked. How does costume affect your lighting and your
everything.
camera choices? Like, can you give an example of like how? Obviously, the one you mentioned earlier was Ariana and her dress and the skirt. Yeah. Can you mention a specific scene with Cynthia where maybe a costume or part of the costume affected the way you were shooting and lighting and everything you were doing in a scene?
Yeah, Paul was. We started doing tests on fabrics really early on, and so I even just we have this. The ASC has this gallery show, and it supports the ASC Scholarship Fund, so young people or people who or any age people can do the ASC master class if they don't have the funds to do it. And the picture that I printed this year is a picture. It's called Grande and Elphaba 2022 London, and it's a picture from one of our tests where it's just a still on a rosette from the popular costume and just an early pleating of Elphaba. And so I printed them next to each other in one frame. And so it was a constant back and forth of how, things like that. And the biggest thing for the second movie is the brim of the hat is much bigger than the first movie, which creates a huge challenge for lighting,
shadowing?
for shadow.
Oh, wow.
And so now I've got a much bigger shadow that's cast on her face.
Oh, wow.
And you can either fight it or you can embrace it. And I decided as long as we could see her eyes, I would embrace where that shadow, where the shadow would fall. And we, depending on how high the light is, we could make that shadow fall at a certain place on her face, and put her into shadow when we wanted to. And so I was able to use the wardrobe as a way of telling the story as well.
It's incredible. You mentioned eyes. I found myself a lot of the time watching the film. You could see an entire character arc in someone's eyes.
Yeah.
Like in Ethan Slater's eyes, like you can literally see his arc with the scene with him and Nessa, and she's essentially not letting him go.
Yep.
And I'm like, how? Like the power of eyes. I want to use that as a way to speak about the performances in this film. Obviously, everybody's remarkable.
Yeah.
Jonathan, Jeff, everybody, Ethan, Cynthia, Ariana, but Cynthia and Ariana specifically, like these are two of the best performances I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, like their performances are like timeless in this movie. Can you speak about just capturing like history in a way of like two of the best performances I've seen in recent years? Just speak about your emotional relationship to capturing these performances in general and what Cynthia and what Ariana have given to you as a cinematographer that you'll move forward with.
So one of my favorite close-ups in the entire movie is it has to do with eyes, and it is after the wedding after Fiyero and Cynthia and Elphaba have left, and Ariana Glinda is there in the control room, and the wizard's in the cage behind, and Madame Morble's trying to unlock it, and there's a whole dialogue scene that's happening with Morble and the wizard. But we never cut to it. It's just out of focus in the background. And Ariana walks up into this close-up, and I had taken out almost all the lights in the wizard's in the Wizard's control room, except the perimeter lights, which are 300-watt light bulbs that are dimmed way down. And I took one teeny dado light and dimmed it to the lowest possible setting, so you only had one teeny little eye light in her eyes.
Oh, wow.
And John came up to me. He's like, "Are we good? We can see her completely, right? Because I want to make sure you can see her eyes." I'm like, "It's perfect," and it is one of my favorite lit moments in the movie. And so, but being able to just sort of suck everything down, just bring just the bare minimum, and we're not cutting. It's so simple. It's one little light on her eyes, and it's a handheld shot. And we use basically no handheld in the first movie, except in the balloon, in the balloon chase up in the first movie. But in the second movie, we use a lot of handheld.
And that's a narrative choice too. Kind of like
choice.
we're off like the rails, the bumpers are taken out in a way.
Yeah, the first movie is the fairy tale, and
Yes.
the second movie is what happens after you realize the fairy tale isn't real.
Right.
So so this is a handheld shot, and again, we have Karsten who doesn't know exactly what she's about to do and needs to be able to just sort of improv off of her too. And so it is this moment where we just let the camera sit and be, and it's a very slow wrap around her and a teeny push in at the right moment. But that is all that it's very, very teeny move, teeny bit of light, but it's all just about making sure that performance is completely captured.
The magic of all this is remarkable. I have to go back real quick to Defying Gravity. Obviously, we've all seen the behind-the-scenes footage of that. The physicality that Cynthia has to possess in that scene is remarkable.
Yeah.
The breathing, flying, and singing. Your perspective on that day, the lighting rigs, the camera set up to capture this incredibly immersive moment that also has to be deeply emotional, but you need to film it in a way where we feel the emotion, we feel like we're actually flying with her, like she's singing what appears to be effortlessly, but it's obviously not effortlessly because she's dealing with like breathing and having to hit notes from certain angles while she's flying. On that day, or I don't know how many days that was shot, but talk about your perspective and how you chose to light it.
We also did it with No Good Deed too.
Yeah.
I mean, she's flying. We've got her floating.
Yeah, that's right.
In No Good Deed too, and in the second movie, she's fully harnessed her power of flight, and at the end of the first movie, it's new and wondrous and not 100%. Perfected,
Right.
And
so you capture it differently.
So we captured it differently, and in No Good Deed, it's we do these handheld shots, and we use we're up on huge platforms, and so we use a mimic rig, which is so the camera operator can be on the ground and do these handheld moves as well. But for that moment with Cynthia, when she's floating in No Good Deed, when the Grimmery is open for her and she's got wind is blowing everywhere and the bright light of the Grimmery has burst and it's like hitting her face in this really intense way, and she has to live sing, and she has to imagine there are an army of monkeys that she's summoning around her. It was people were the crew was standing by the side of the crane or the monitors, just sobbing as she's doing this moment. And if you've ever met Cynthia in real life, she's quite petite, and to hear that voice come out of her and the power that she holds inside of her is insane. And it is. I sat. That moment was really challenging for her. And a couple of weeks ago, we were at a Q&A, and she told this story where she's sitting on a crash pad below one of the pillars, and she's drinking some water, and we're in the middle of a very long shoot of 2 movies, and I could tell she was nervous and concerned, and she had asked to see playback, and I don't think she had seen it yet, and I sat down next to her, and I said to her, "Don't worry, Cynthia, I'm taking care of you, and you look beautiful. are amazing. It's all wonderful. And she said she never asked to see playback after I sat down and said that to her.
Because you had her, in the sense of like you were taking care of her, and she trusted you.
And she trusted me. And I think that was the remarkable thing about our entire crew, from production design to VFX to costume design to special effects. Every department felt there was this care among all of us as collaborators and creators, and we knew we were making this special movie. We had no clue what the reaction would be, but the making of it was so special. And even though we're in these big epic worlds, there was, and you talked about being epic and intimate, the intimacy we had among the crew and the tenderness, I've never experienced that in my life before.
We feel that as an audience, because there's a lot of care. Yeah. And I think it's a beautiful thing that you were able to give Cynthia that ability to get out of her head a bit and just do the scene, because like to have that trust. There was something you mentioned earlier about these hero shots, that you had a specific lens for Glinda and a specific lens for Elphaba. My mind has been thinking about that since then. What about like Michelle Yeoh's character, Jonathan Bailey's character, Ethan Slater's characters? Do they all have lenses that are specific to their hero shots as well?
No, I think they are the supporting cast.
So they don't get a hero lens.
So I never had a specific hero lens. It was based off of where Elphaba was in the scene or where Glinda was in the scene, because everything should be supporting. That's the story we're supporting. That's the journey we're on.
I know we have to get out of here. I want to hit you with a couple geek out things.
Okay.
The underwater sequence in Tick, Tick, Boom.
Oh.
That's one of my favorite shots you've ever done. I remember geeking out with, I think I mentioned it to Andrew when I interviewed him for it, and also Lin-Manuel. I think Andrew's dad was like a swimmer or something.
Andrew
I can't remember.
swims.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe his dad is a swim coach.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
But I remember him talking about that. That scene is so incredible. If you don't, if I'm just gonna I feel like I'm like that Chris Farley episode. Hey, remember that scene, that movie you did, but with that shot?
I love Tick, Tick, Boom. I just had lunch with Lynn last week in New York when we did our New York premiere. It is so that swimming pool for Tick, Tick, Boom, we were scouting different swimming pools around Manhattan, and we ended up at this one swimming pool where the lane line, the tile of the lane lines at the bottom of the pool looked like staff paper. And the great part of prepping that movie was that Lynn treated it like he would a stage musical, where we were rewriting stuff during prep. And so Stephen Levinson, the writer, the storyboard artist, and the production designer, and Lynn and I would sit down and discuss each scene while we were drawing the storyboards. And when we'd come up with ideas, Stephen Levinson would rewrite it into the script. So there weren't music notes that appeared in the script in that scene.
Oh, wow.
The discovery process in prep on that movie was incredible. And so he just heard it. But then we're standing there and we realize it looks like staff paper. And Lynn goes, well, what if he wipes the 30, which is the age he's about to become, and it suddenly becomes a music note? And so then we started exploring that idea. And then a few weeks later, we found out that was actually the swimming pool Jonathan Larson would swim in every day.
Completely coincidental.
Completely coincidental.
I mean, that's just like movie. That's the universe speaking to you right there.
There was some Jonathan Larson magic that it felt like he was whispering in our ears the entire making of that movie. Yeah. That was I have been incredibly lucky the last 8 years in the movies I've gotten to make and the people I've gotten to work with.
And it's funny for Tick, Tick, Boom, for me, I feel like I got to meet him.
Oh, Jonathan!
Through the filmmaking,
Yeah.
The dance sequence on the side of the building in the Heights.
Yes,
walk me through a little bit about that, because that is one of the that's one of those shots that I think I've seen how it's done, but I don't understand it.
Okay, so that was great. Our AD Joe Reedy on that movie said, I think the way we're going to do it is film it in the morning, and then we'll break for lunch and shoot something else in the afternoon. So every day we will learn something as we go. And so we did that. I can't remember, a week, maybe 4 days, something like that. So I think it was 4 days. I think we had 2 shooting days to do it, but we did 4 half days. And so it's called When the Sun Goes Down. So it takes place at sunset, and we sun only sets north of the George Washington Bridge 2 days a year.
Wow.
So it is a green screen that we shot when the sun goes down on, but it has a hydraulic wall that moves down, and we do this camera move so that you don't ever see you feel like we're anti-gravity the whole time. So they start. Benny and Nina start on in this dialogue conversation on the fire escape, and then she goes and leans against or sits against the wall, and Benny's standing, sort of leaning on the fire escape, and he's holding the fire escape so that when the hydraulic starts from it starting completely vertical to become, it basically drops down. It's like a postage stamp that drops down into a huge wall of a brick of a New York City building. So as it drops down, we do this camera move that where you lose your sense of horizon, you have no clue, and then we pull out and we don't cut. And we learned this all because we went to a mocap stage, a motion capture stage, and rehearsed, and we realized the second you cut, sort of like Girl in the Bubble, you breaks the magic spell, the magic trick, the illusion. So this is happening at sundown. So when that happens, I also need to change the direction of where the sky is and where the sun is. So I have this arc of sky, which are sky panels through a rag that covers the entire set, that starts at the top as a sky would, and then as the wall tilts, the light needs to change so that now flat is now behind them is where the sky is. And then at the same time too, I need to change my hard sun source. So we've shot the plate at this point for the sun because there are only 2 days where the sun hits north of the George Washington Bridge, and that's where we wanted the sun to be. And so we shot on both days when it's north of the George Washington Bridge. We shot those 2 days for the plate of the building.
And you replace that plate with the green screen. Essentially, that shot becomes the green screen.
But the sun needs to stay in the same place. So we've got a light on a crane with human beings moving the light so that the direction of the sun always remains consistent in that scene as well. So it's a lighting, camera, special effects movie magic trick.
Yeah, imagine telling that little girl when you were a kid that you'd be doing all these insane lighting rigs, and I mean, it's remarkable. I want to say thank you for being here today. It's been an honor just breaking down your process, and I really hope people understand how much work goes into this and how much thought goes into this, and like just the idea of the different colors and like the lighting and how it changes mood. It's like I always think of Dario Argento's Suspiria, the way he used light. Like it's just interesting. Lighting is such a fascinating part of storytelling, and you're one of the best to do it. So congratulations on all your success, and thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Alice Brooks.
Thank you.